I met her 2 months ago, and I already knew I wanted to marry her. The way she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams, it was like she was meant for me. She had a way of making the world feel brighter, lighter, even on my darkest days. Her voice was soft but carried meaning in every word, like she had an endless depth of kindness and understanding within her. I had never met anyone like her, and I knew I never would again. She loved old books, the kind with pages so worn they felt like silk under your fingertips. She would run her hands over their spines, murmuring about the history they carried, the lives they had touched. She wanted to be a writer, to capture the world in stories that people would hold close to their hearts. I wanted to give her the world she dreamed of, a life where she never had to worry about bills or struggling to make ends meet. I wanted to build something with her, something real. But dreams require money, and my job barely covered rent. I needed more. That's when he found me. I never saw his face clearly. He reached out through an anonymous message offering a job. Simple, he said. Sneak into an abandoned mansion and retrieve an artifact from the basement. He didn't explain why or what it was, only that it was valuable. Payment. Enough to buy my dream ring, to start our life together. That ring. It wasn't just any engagement ring. I had seen it once in an antique shop, a delicate Victorian-era piece with a sapphire the color of midnight skies. The filigree was intricate, curling around the band like ivy, and the moment I saw it, I knew it belonged on her hand. She had always loved sapphires, said they reminded her of the ocean at night, endless and full of mystery. But the price was more than I could afford, even if I saved for years. This job, this one job, would change everything. The mansion belonged to Alastair Durnell, a serial killer who terrorized the city over a century ago. He was a man of wealth and influence, known for hosting lavish parties in his grotesquely large estate. But beneath the luxury, beneath the charm and the perfectly polished facade, he was a monster. His victims were never found whole. What pieces they did find were grotesquely displayed, stitched together like horrific art pieces, left in alleys, inside churches, sometimes even nailed to doors. His signature? Glass eyes forced into the sockets of the dead, eerie and lifeless, staring at those who discovered them. The authorities never caught him. One night he vanished. Some say he fled the country. Others believe something more sinister happened. Maybe the spirits of those he tormented dragged him to hell. But his house remained, untouched, abandoned, a decaying tomb of his crimes. They say the walls whisper at night, that if you get too close, you'll hear the faint, rasping echoes of his laughter. And that basement, nobody ever went into that basement. The few who tried never came back. The town wanted to forget. The mansion still stood, rotting and forgotten, swallowed by the forest. I should have said no. I arrived at midnight, armed with a flashlight and a crowbar. The house loomed in front of me, massive and broken by time. The windows were empty sockets, jagged shards of glass clinging desperately to their frames like rotting teeth. The porch sagged, warped wooden slats jutting up at odd angles. Vines twisted around the columns like veins feeding a corpse. The front door stood open, as if expecting me. Inside, the air was thick, stale, carrying the scent of decay. Dust swirled in the beam of my flashlight, settling like a shroud over abandoned furniture, covered in yellowed sheets. Ornate crown moldings curled along the ceilings, but the designs were warped with age, curling inward like skeletal fingers grasping at the walls. A grand staircase, its banister splintered and scarred, curved up into darkness. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystal arms tangled with cobwebs. Once this house had been beautiful, now it was a mausoleum. My footsteps echoed too loudly, swallowed by the vast emptiness. The walls were covered in old, peeling wallpaper, but beneath it, something darker lurked. Strange markings scratched into the wood, symbols I didn't recognize, overlapping, some deep enough to have splintered the panels. The house had secrets. It wanted them to stay buried. Then I heard it, a shuffle upstairs. I froze. No one was supposed to be here. Another shuffle. Closer. The rational part of me screamed, "Get out!" But something deeper, something darker, pushed me forward. My heart pounded as I turned toward the staircase, each step groaning beneath my weight. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the house itself was watching me. I reached the landing. Moonlight filtered through the cracked windows, casting long, distorted shadows. There were doors lining the hallway, their brass handles tarnished and rusting. I hesitated, every nerve screaming for me to go back, but curiosity sank its claws into me. I pushed open the first door. A bedroom. The bed was still made, its sheets stiff with age. A vanity stood against the far wall, its mirror covered with a sheet. The fabric was stained, almost like old blood. My fingers twitched toward it, compelled by something I couldn't name. Then I heard it again. A whisper. I turned sharply toward the hallway. Another door creaked open on its own. Something moved inside. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. The house was not empty. My breath was shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears as I forced myself forward. The house had too many shadows, and none of them seemed natural. The hallway before me stretched impossibly long, distorting under the pale moonlight that spilled through the cracked windows. Something was wrong. The space itself felt warped, bending at angles that made no sense. A movement in my peripheral vision stopped me cold. I turned my head slowly, every nerve in my body screaming, "Don't look," but I did. The mirror, at the end of the hall, once covered in dust and grime, was now spotless, reflecting the corridor behind me. But I wasn't alone in the reflection. There were figures, twisted, broken figures standing motionless, their mouths gaping in silent screams. Their skin was stitched in jagged patterns, their glass eyes catching the dim light like hungry, waiting things. One of them lifted a withered hand, the fingers splintered like old wood, and pointed directly at me. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I wanted to run, to flee this cursed place, but I clenched my jaw. No, I had come too far, and I needed to finish this job. For her. For us. I kept walking, even as the walls seemed to close in. The deeper I went, the colder it became. My breath turned to mist before me. I could hear something breathing, slow and deliberate, just beyond my vision. I gripped my flashlight tighter, though I had no idea what I would do if something stepped into the light. A door creaked open ahead of me. I hadn't touched it. Beyond it was a room filled with bones. Piles of them, stacked haphazardly, some still tangled in the remnants of old clothing. A rusted wheelchair stood in the corner facing the wall, as if someone had been left there to watch something. The walls were lined with grotesque paintings. No, not paintings, preserved flesh, stretched and dried, arranged like twisted artwork. I swallowed back bile. I needed to keep moving. Then I heard it. A voice, a dry whisper, like leaves scraping over stone. "See us." The door behind me slammed shut. I turned, and there, standing where the door had been open moments before, was a figure stitched together from pieces of the dead. Its glass eyes were fixed on me. I bolted, down the hall, toward the basement. My footsteps pounded against the warped wooden floors, the air growing thicker, heavier, as if something enormous pressed down on me. I knew the basement was my only option. Whatever was in this house, it wanted me trapped, and whatever was whispering my name from the shadows, It wasn't done with me yet. The door to the basement was heavy, locked from the outside. Why would someone lock a basement from the outside? The thought clawed at the back of my mind, but I forced it away. I pried it open, the rusted hinges screaming in protest as a rush of stale air spilled out like a dying breath. The stairs spiraled into darkness, a gaping maw swallowing what little light my flashlight provided. The deeper I went, the colder it became. Each step creaked beneath my weight, as if the house itself resisted my intrusion. The smell changed. Damp earth, rotting wood, and something metallic. Something wrong. The scent clung to my nostrils like decay had taken root in the very walls. Then I heard whispers. I whipped around, my flashlight darting over the crumbling stone walls. Nothing, but the whispers didn't stop. They slithered through the air, hushed, fragmented voices weaving together in a chorus of suffering. My skin crawled. I was not alone. At the bottom, the room sprawled before me, cluttered with rusted tools, shattered furniture, and rotting crates stacked like tombstones. Something scuttled in the shadows, too quick for me to catch. The flashlight flickered. Then my beam landed on something horrifying. A row of wooden chairs, each holding a skeletal figure, bound by ancient, decayed rope. The skulls were tilted downward, as if they had been left watching their own deaths. Their mouths were open in silent screams, and their fingers had been severed, as if someone had taken trophies. I swallowed bile and kept searching, forcing myself past the corpses. My foot caught on something hard, a jawbone, still attached to remnants of shriveled flesh. Beyond the chairs, old shelves lined the walls, filled with rusting surgical tools, saws, clamps, serrated knives, all covered in a thick layer of dried black residue. Some of the tools were embedded in hunks of petrified flesh, as if someone had been practicing their craft long after the bodies had gone cold. A cracked workbench sat against the farthest wall, covered in old notebooks, their pages brittle and stained. I picked one up, hesitating before flipping it open. The handwriting was jagged, erratic. Diagrams of the human body, sketches of grotesque modifications, notes scrawled in desperate, unhinged script. They must be perfect. I must see them move. The eyes, they do not scream, but they watch. I am not alone down here. They whisper, even now. I dropped the book, my breath sharp and uneven. Something was watching me. Then I saw it, an odd gap in the stone wall, a crack just wide enough for a door. As I reached out, the whispers stopped. The silence was worse. Something breathed behind me, and it was close. I pressed against it, and the wall shifted. A hidden door. Behind it, a narrow tunnel stretched downward, deeper than any basement should go. My gut screamed at me to leave, but I was in too deep. The air changed the moment I stepped inside. It was thick, damp, filled with the stench of rot. The walls, rough stone, slick with moisture, seemed to breathe around me. The floor sloped downward at an unnatural angle, pulling me into the bowels of the earth. Then my flashlight flickered, once, twice, before dying completely. Total darkness. A second passed, then another. I reached for my phone. No signal. The blackness swallowed me whole, pressing in, suffocating. My breath came in sharp bursts, echoing off the tunnel walls. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Something else. Close. Too close. I gripped the wall, inching forward blindly. The breathing grew louder, ragged, hungry. The sound bounced around the tunnel, impossible to pinpoint. My fingers ran over deep scratch marks carved into the stone, as if something had tried to claw its way out. Then my hand brushed against something soft, skin. I jerked back, heart hammering. The air thickened, turning foul. I fumbled with my flashlight, smacking it against my palm until it flickered back to life. The beam landed on a face. No, not a face. A mask of human skin stitched together, covering something underneath. And it moved. The tunnel narrowed, the walls pressing in. My breath shuddered, the putrid air filling my lungs. I had to keep moving. Further in, the floor became uneven, littered with bones, some still wrapped in degraded cloth, others stripped bare. Rusted shackles dangled from the ceiling, some still holding dusty, shriveled limbs. The ceiling sagged, wooden beams splintered, as if something had thrashed against them. The whispers returned. Not one voice, many. A disjointed, fevered chorus. See us, stay, be with us. Shadows moved, not just on the walls, but within them. The tunnel walls shifted, bulging like a breathing organism. Something scuttled ahead, the sound of nails scraping stone. I had to keep going. A set of wooden steps emerged ahead, leading deeper down. At the bottom, something waited. Something watched me. I pressed forward, my breath quickening. The air grew denser, heavier with the scent of decay and damp earth. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, swallowed by the hungry darkness. The tunnel narrowed further, forcing me to hunch as I moved. The walls, slick with moisture, pulsed as if alive. I ran my hand along the stone, feeling grooves, no, etchings. Strange symbols, carved deep into the rock, arranged in twisted, unnatural patterns. I had to find the box. A faint glint caught my eye ahead. A pedestal, half buried in the dirt, stood at the tunnel's end. And on it, the artifact, a black ornate box, no larger than a shoebox, its surface carved with intricate, writhing patterns. The engravings seemed to move, shifting as my eyes traced them. I reached for it, a rustling behind me. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my grip. The tunnel was no longer empty. Figures emerged from the shadows, their bodies gaunt, stitched together, their eyes glassy, watching. The whispers grew into screams. I grabbed the box, its surface cold as death. The figures lunged. I ran. The tunnel shook, the walls buckling. The air pressed against me, something enraged, screaming from the depths. As I reached the basement, the hidden door slammed shut behind me. But I wasn't alone. Something pounded from the other side. Then, footsteps. It was coming after me. I bolted out of the house just as the door slammed shut behind me. The impact sent a rush of air past my face, and then silence. The woods stood still, an unnatural calmness settling in as if nothing had happened, as if the horrors inside had never existed. I gasped, my lungs burning, hands trembling. My fingers tightened around the artifact, a small, ancient box carved with strange, shifting symbols. It was heavy, far heavier than it should have been, as if it carried something more than just wood and metal. Then, a shadow moved. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. The man was waiting for me at the meeting point. "You got it," he said, his voice low, expectant. He reached out. His fingers were too long, too thin. His nails, black, dead things curling at the tips. My gut screamed at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I hesitated. Something was wrong. Then, he grinned. That stitched grin. The same one I had seen in the tunnel. A slow, cold realization crept through my spine, chilling me to the core. The job had never been about the artifact. It was about bringing something out of that house. I had helped it escape. A breeze picked up, whispering through the trees, or was it laughter? The sound seeped into my bones, twisting inside me. The house had never been a prison. It had been a cocoon. And now, it was free. My stomach churned. My hands trembled as I released the box into the man's waiting grip. His fingers caressed it, reverent, as if holding something sacred. His eyes glimmered, too hungry, too knowing. "I'll be in touch," he murmured, turning away. And then, just like that, he was gone. For a long moment I stood there, frozen, my mind racing with what I had done. The weight in my chest was suffocating, pressing down with the knowledge that I had unleashed something terrible into the world. But then, I thought of her. I closed my eyes and imagined it, the ring glinting on my bride's delicate finger, a sapphire deep as the midnight sky encased in an intricate band of gold. She wasn't here with me, but I could picture it so clearly, as if she were. And I thought it was still worth it. A sick sort of calm settled over me. The deal had been made, the price paid, and I had what I wanted. Then my phone buzzed, a new message from him. "I have another job for you." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady now. The fear, the regret, it was gone. Something new settled in its place. Because now I knew the truth. I had worked for him once, and now I was his now. There was no turning back, and I will be making a very good living.